name is Becky LeBeau. Becky's a full-time education outreach specialist with Ocean County Soil Conservation District. She's also an adjunct professor at Kane University. She instructs the Barnegat Bay Volunteer Master Naturalist course through Ocean County College and leads birding tours with Ocean County Parks and Recreation. In total, Becky has over 20 years of experience as a formal classroom teacher and informal environmental educator. She serves as co-leader for the Jersey Shore chapter of the Native Plant Society of New Jersey. She co-authored the Kids Guide to Exploring Nature, published by the Brooklyn Botanic Garden. Becky enjoys landscaping her own yard to attract and support birds and wildlife, and strives to inspire others to make small but positive changes in home landscaping practices for a healthier planet. She did ask that you hold your questions until after the presentation, and I do encourage you to, if you want to type something in the chat room, which is at the bottom, the questions will be answered in order that they were received. So if something pops into your mind during Becky's presentation, please put your question in the chat room, and then we'll go straight through them. No like waving hands and all that kind of stuff, because we have to try to stay somewhat organized. So you can just type your question right in the chat room. It's at the bottom of your screen. Okay, so save your questions till the end. And we now welcome Becky LeBeau.
Thank you, Gwen. Thank you very much. And I really appreciate the invitation from the Horticultural Society of South Jersey. Thank you for inviting me tonight to present my program, Low Maintenance Landscaping with Jersey Friendly Yards. And my name is Becky LeBeau, and I'm the Education Outreach Specialist with Ocean County Soil Conservation District. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. So if you are unfamiliar with a soil conservation district, I completely understand, unless you're a builder or an engineer or a farmer, or you're having a new house built, you're most likely have never heard of a soil conservation district. So I'm going to tell you what a soil conservation district is and what we do. And the primary purpose of a soil conservation district is to ensure compliance with numerous regulations regarding the disturbance and protection of soil. And soil is considered a non-renewable natural resource, and arguably one that we cannot live without. We all require healthy soil in order to grow plants and plant materials for food and clothes and furniture and homes. And healthy soil cleans the water we use for drinking and swimming and recreation. And we require healthy soil as a foundation for our homes and our neighborhoods. And we require healthy soil as a foundation for our gardens. And history has taught us that we need to respect and protect our soil. The Dust Bowl of the 1930s, maybe you've heard of that, sometimes referred to as the Dirty 30s. And this was a period of severe dust storms, which caused major agricultural damage to American prairie lands. And it was actually caused by severe drought. And that drought was coupled with decades of extensive mismanaged farming practices. Due to the crisis of this Dust Bowl, Congress actually passed Public Law number 46, and they declared that soil and water conservation is a national policy. And in 1937, President Franklin D. Roosevelt recommended that states form soil and water conservation districts. And today, there are almost 3,000 different soil conservation districts across our entire country. And the Ocean County Soil Conservation District originated in 1952, and we are one of 15 different soil conservation districts in New Jersey. And we all work together to implement what's called the New Jersey Soil Erosion and Sediment Control Act, which governs various aspects of new development and agricultural industries. The Ocean County Soil Conservation District is a subdivision of the New Jersey Department of Agriculture. However, we are locally governed and we operate within the boundaries of Ocean County. And Ocean County Soil Conservation District has developed an education program designed to heighten awareness about the importance of natural resources and their conservation and to promote environmental stewardship. And I am very, very fortunate to have the very fulfilling role of Education Outreach Specialist for Ocean County Soil Conservation District. And on behalf of the district, I offer a variety of education programs that bring awareness to the importance of natural resources, including soil and water, and plants and wildlife. And so your role, I'm assuming everyone here today is a backyard gardener or a garden enthusiast, and you are a really important component of stewardship. And being a gardener is an important way for you to be an environmental steward as well. So throughout tonight's program, I'm going to share a few ways for you to enhance your yard or your garden or your landscape using tools and resources created and compiled through an initiative called Jersey Friendly Yards. And these Jersey Friendly Yards landscaping practices will save you time and money and effort, and most importantly, help protect your little piece of the planet that you call home. So I'm going to start by introducing you to the Jersey Friendly Yards website and share with you some of the tools and resources found on the website. And then I'll introduce you to one of our Jersey Friendly gardeners who implemented these Jersey Friendly practices. And I'm going to showcase her very inspiring Jersey Friendly yard. So you should now be looking at the Jersey Friendly Yards website. So in 2012, an organization called the Barnegat Bay Partnership received funding from the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection to create this website called Jersey Friendly Yards. And the goal was to reduce people pollution. And people pollution that was carried from yards by stormwater runoff into our waterways, and essentially to address eutrophication at the source. And I'm going to scroll down and click on Barnegat Bay Partnership, and it's going to take you to a website that talks a little bit about who the Barnegat Bay Partnership is. And they are actually considered a national estuary program for the Barnegat Bay watershed. And you may have never heard of a national estuary program. That's understandable. There's actually only 28 national estuary programs in the entire United States. And they actually had to be legislated into existence by Congress. And amazingly, New Jersey actually has 3 NEPs or national estuary programs within our state, which is incredible. But it shows that our coastal wetlands are of great importance and were recognized as needing protection. You can visit the Barnegat Bay Partnership to find out more about who they are and the work that they do by clicking this link here, or you can just go to barnegatbaypartnership.org. So up at the top, threats to bays and rivers. This talks a little bit about fertilizers in our waterways.
Becky, you're muted.
Oh my. Can you hear me now?
You're good now.
Oh my goodness, okay. I'm so sorry. I think when I switched over to the website, maybe it automatically mutes me. Did you hear my introduction at all on the PowerPoint?
Yeah, we heard through the Jersey Friendly Yard. It was just like the last maybe 15 seconds or so.
Oh, that's interesting. All right, please do let me know if I ever become unmuted again or muted again. Sorry about that. Um, did you hear me explain that the Barnegat Bay Partnership was a national estuary program?
Yes.
Yes, okay. So I wonder if I click on the website, if that automatically mutes me. So I'm going to try that. Basically, I'm going to introduce you to a couple of tools on the Jersey Friendly Yards website that were created specifically for homeowners. So I'm going to introduce you to three of them: the interactive yard, 8 steps to a Jersey Friendly Yard, and the Jersey Friendly Plant Database. So right now I'm going to click on the interactive yard and let me know if that mutes me. Okay, can you hear me now?
You're good.
Excellent. All right, so this is the interactive yard, and I'm going to start the interactive yard. So basically, this is kind of an educational tool. Over here on the right-hand side, you can basically play and click on these different drop-down menus, and you can see that you're starting with kind of a basic yard. And these different drop-down menus offer you different tools to see what it might be like to remove impervious surfaces and old sidewalks. And then you can actually install maybe a new driveway that has pavers that allow water to soak in the ground and a new walkway. You can remove invasive species. So I can go to the front entrance and I can actually remove Japanese barberry and winter creeper. And then I can add new beds and add interesting plants. I can create a bed. I can add blue star and sedum and little blue stem, and then add other beds. I can add English ivy. Oh no, English ivy is an invasive species. So this tool educates the gardener about how to plant, what to plant, and what not to plant. So it throws some zingers. There's lots of other things you can do. Add many beds around the entire perimeter, start a vegetable garden, do lots of different things. And at the very end, you can see the amazing ways that you can change this particular yard and how to apply these concepts to your own yard. So it's a fun little tool to play around with. Also, there's 8 steps to a Jersey Friendly Yard. And these 8 steps provide you with lots of information about planning your garden. We're the soil district, so of course, starting with healthy soil is of the utmost importance to us. There's lots of links you can click on. You can learn how to take a sample in your yard, where to send your sample, how to prepare the paperwork, lots of different information provided in the 8 steps to a Jersey Friendly Yard page. And then my favorite web page is the Jersey Friendly Plant Database. So our database has over 400 different species. And I was playing with this earlier, so I'm going to start fresh and take off all of the filters I was playing with earlier. I'm actually going to sign in. The first thing you want to do is register or sign in. You don't have to, but if you do, you can then save the list that you create and print it out and take it with you to the nursery if you'd like. So I'm going to sign in. So my computer knows my name and password. That was the page that you would actually use to sign in. And then it would automatically take me to my Jersey Friendly plants list. So I've already collected a whole bunch of different plants from the database and put them in my list. So I'm planning my garden, what I want to add to it next spring. But I'm going to go back to the search results. And if you don't have your own page yet, you would be directed right to this database. And the database is, like I said, 400 different plants. They're all listed over here on the right-hand side. And right now it's being sorted by the newest plants because I've just added probably about another dozen over the past couple months. But usually they're alphabetical, and you can use this sort by menu over here on the right. You can actually change that so they're alphabetized. And over here on the left, I can either, if I want to find a specific plant, maybe I want a type of coneflower. I really like coneflowers. I like the way they look. So I pop that in and it will reduce the list to anything that has the word coneflower in it. But maybe I want to just sort for all the plants that are appropriate for my particular yard. And maybe I want to plant a nice shady garden. So I can go over here and use the search filters. First, I select a region, and we're all in South Jersey, so I would choose coastal plain. And you don't have to use all the filters. You can skip one if you want. The more filters you use, of course, you're going to reduce your list. You're going to narrow down your choices. There are special ecoregions you can choose from. If you live on the Barrier Island or coastal, or if you live in the Pinelands. Of course, we went from 300 and some odd plants in the south to 125 or 107. Plant type, I like flowers, perennials, so I'm going to choose that one. Now that's reduced me to 145 different species in the database that I can choose from. Maybe you are a native plant enthusiast. I like native plants, so it's narrowed down to all the natives. I can pick my bloom color, my bloom time. If I have deer problem in my yard, I can choose that. Of course, that will narrow down your list quite a bit. If you want to attract a particular type of pollinator or birds, you can choose attracts wildlife. Light requirements are pretty important. I'm looking to plant a shady garden. So I'm going to reduce my list to 31 different plants that have all these requirements: coastal plain, perennials, natives, and they like shade. Soil type, soil is all important. Most of us probably have sandy soil here in the South. Some folks might have some clay soil. pH, soil moisture, drought tolerance is pretty important. High drought tolerance, that'll reduce me to only 3. How about we just keep that open? And then if you are along the coast, you can add salt tolerance, and certainly de-icing salt. All the salt trucks that drop salt can affect our gardens as well, so we can choose that. So over on the right-hand side, I have a list 3 pages worth of plants. And I selected native, so these are native to New Jersey. These are all the plants in the database that coincide with my yard. Coastal plain, I want flowers, natives, light shade, sandy soil. And as you saw, I could even narrow that down more specifically with my pH, water, how moist is my soil. So if I take a look at this top one, or actually, how about anemone? I love wood anemones. They're really pretty. You can see my wheelbarrow is gray. And if I click on that, okay, it's going to turn orange. And that means it's entered in my list. So I'm going to go view my plant list that you saw earlier. Looks like it bounced me out. Log in. Okay, it's giving me some trouble. Let me go back. All right, so that actually should then be added to my plant list, as I had showed you earlier. Of course, also, if you want to learn a little bit more about the plant before you actually add it to your list, you can click on the plant and it's going to show you some photos, what the plant looks like, a description of it, and then all the different details you'd ever want to know. Common names, and it tells you all the different features that were in the filters. Is it native? Yes. Bloom time, spring. The color, deer resistance. Even if you didn't click on it in the filter system, it's still going to give you that information here. The light needs, the water needs, the soil characteristics, the height, the spread, the growth rate. So lots of great information. So then once you get your list, as I mentioned, you can go and make your purchase at the nursery. And where to buy native plants is always a big question. So we have a list of different nurseries or places that sell native plants. Maybe not in their entire stock, might not be native plants, but they certainly, we've vetted them as much as we possibly could to make sure that they do have a good selection of native plants. And we've listed them by county, and that's in alphabetical order. So depending on where you live. And then you can also scroll all the way down to the bottom to see some wholesale nurseries, nurseries across the border in Pennsylvania, and a link to the Native Plant Society that also has a wonderful and very wide and varied list of nurseries that carry native plants. Lots of other things to explore on this website. One of the other features is our workshops and events, and we are hosting a series of webinars this year. We happen to host them at the same time you do on the second Tuesday of the month at from 7 to 8. So that's going on right now, actually. So the good thing about I think most webinars these days are recorded, so no worries. You can go back and there will be a link here to listen to Sabrina's talk that she's doing tonight. And I can also, if I'm not attending one of your webinars, I know now that I can also request a link to the recording of your webinars as well. So that's wonderful. All right, so I'm going to continue on with my PowerPoint. Let's see. There we go. All right, so is everybody able to see the slideshow again, and you're still able to hear me?
You're good to go.
Okay, thank you. Okay. So as I mentioned earlier, I'm going to introduce you to one of our Jersey-friendly gardeners, and here's Phyllis. And Phyllis is an Ocean County Master Gardener, and her interest is in IPM, which is Integrated Pest Management. She's also interested in raising and releasing butterflies, and she has an interest in attracting and supporting birds and wildlife to her yard. And Phyllis implores a chemical-free garden. A no chemical approach to gardening is much easier on your wallet. It allows for more time to spend in your garden rather than away from your garden, and maintains a healthier environment for you and for your family and for wildlife. So Phyllis applied to participate in one of our Jersey Friendly Yards small grant programs 3 years ago. And she wanted help turning her yard, her front yard, into an oasis for pollinators. So Phyllis particularly enjoys butterflies and moths. She's involved in a butterfly tagging program and wanted to be able to attract and provide ample food sources for both the larva, caterpillar stages, as well as the adult stages within an insect life cycle. So in April of 2018, we assessed her yard and talked about the steps she would take to lose her lawn and grow a garden in its place. So less lawn means less mowing, spending more time enjoying the garden, and spending less money on fertilizers and water. Of course, she got her soil tested first, and it was determined that she had a soil texture somewhere between sandy loam and loamy sand, meaning a very high content of sand, not unlike many of us in South Jersey. And her pH was 6.87, which is very slightly acidic, and at the upper range of the optimum pH for many plants. And although Phyllis was focusing on native plants, many of which do prefer a lightly acidic soil, similar to hers or even more acidic than her soil, instead of adding any inputs to lower the pH, chemical inputs, Phyllis didn't want to do that. She opted for adding organic matter to her garden once it was established. And organic matter is an excellent remedy to many soil issues, and it actually acts like a buffer, a pH buffer to soils that might be either too acidic or too alkaline. And the macronutrient levels of potassium, phosphorus, and calcium in Phyllis's soil were below optimum, but not excruciatingly low. And because she was focusing on native plants that generally thrive in very dry and nutrient poor soils, again, she opted to put organic matter in her soil through the addition of compost rather than adding chemical fertilizers. So the level of magnesium was at an optimum level, and then her micronutrient levels were all adequate, and it was no surprise that she had high iron content in her soil, as most of us do in South Jersey. So she logged on to the Jersey Friendly Yards website, and she used the interactive yard for ideas and inspiration, as well as the plant database to determine the right plants for her space. And 3 years later, here is what her front lawn now looks like. It's an oasis for pollinators. And she actually lives on a corner lot. So here is her front lawn from another direction. And here is that view a year into her Jersey Friendly Garden makeover, July of 2019. And here's Phyllis. She's waving by the mailbox, and she's proudly showcasing her garden in July of 2020, so just this past summer. So we're going to take a virtual tour of Phyllis's garden and learn about the many plant species and garden features that Phyllis included in her Jersey Friendly garden design. So right below her mailbox, you can see this prickly pear cactus, Opuntia humifusa. It is New Jersey's only native cactus. It has flat, fleshy, oval evergreen pads, and they stand upright. They can also lie horizontally on the ground. And the pads become somewhat desiccated and shriveled during the winter, but they do plump up again in the spring very nicely. And these really beautiful yellow ornate flowers develop right along the top of each pad, and they bloom in the summer, June and July. And each flower is actually diurnal, and it blooms for only one day. But they're magnets for bees, and it's really fun. I really enjoy watching the bees. They kind of dive into the center of the flowers looking for nectar and pollen, and it's kind of fun to watch them. They literally swim around through the stamen, and then they fly off just covered in yellow pollen grains. And then a red edible fruit follows fertilization. The flowers, the fruits, and the pads all offer food for wildlife, and they're also edible for humans. But there are very tiny, almost invisible reddish spikes that necessitate much care when handling all parts of the plant, so do be careful. You can use prickly pear in seaside gardens and rock gardens. They like sunshine, so sunny borders, dry sandy areas of your yard. They're great as a ground cover. If a neighbor has one or a friend, you can literally break the pad off, stick it in very sandy soil. It will grow roots, and you can start your own patch of prickly pear. It does not need any fertilizer. It's extremely drought tolerant, and it requires zero maintenance. So swamp milkweed, I'm guessing you're all very familiar with milkweeds in this group. Phyllis's very dry, sandy garden has had very surprising success with swamp milkweed, which typically prefers a moist soil. It's a wildlife-friendly perennial and host plant for monarch. You probably know that. It's also host plant for queen butterfly larvae. The stems and leaves have that milky sap, which contain the cardiac glycosides, and we know that when ingested by monarch butterfly larvae feeding on the leaves, those cardiac glycosides make them and the adult butterflies very toxic to birds and predators. And as the name suggests, swamp milkweed prefers wet soils, but it does have a very deep taproot, so it can tolerate those well-drained soils when in cultivation. However, its deep taproot does make it difficult to transplant once it's established. So be sure and plant it in the exact location that you want it to live in your garden. And then you can enjoy those clusters of really beautiful, fragrant pink flowers that bloom in July and August. And then those flowers are followed by those beautiful elongated seed pods, which I love to use as dried flower arrangements. And then the flower nectar is an important food source for bees and butterflies, and hummingbirds visit mine in my yard. So you can grow this plant in rain gardens. You can grow it along edges of ponds or streams. It can be used in back borders and meadows, and of course in butterfly gardens. So Phyllis has created labels for her plants. They indicate different qualities and characteristics as noted on the Jersey Friendly Yards plant database in the filter system. For example, as her symbols indicate, swamp milkweed is native to New Jersey. It tolerates rabbit and deer browse. It attracts beneficial insects and bees and butterflies, and it is host plants for butterfly larvae for the monarchs. So world milkweed, Asclepias verticillata, is another host plant for monarch, not as well known, I don't think. It has very skinny whorled leaves around the stem. There are clusters of white to greenish white flowers near the top of each plant. They grow to be about 2 feet tall. World milkweed can bloom anytime between July and September, which is a little bit later in the year than many other milkweeds. The nectar of the flowers attracts many kinds of insects, including long-tongued bees and short-tongued bees and wasps and flies and butterflies and skippers and beetles. And like swamp milkweed, it is deer and rabbit resistant. And also like swamp milkweed, it requires no chemical, nutrient inputs. They are considered weedy. Milkweeds are typically considered weedy in the sense that they need very little help from humans to thrive in their natural environment. But I think you would agree with me that these are very, very beautiful. So as we continue to walk along the pathway and peer into Phyllis's garden beds, I want to bring your attention to a few specific plants. So here we have large-headed, also called long-headed coneflower, Ratibida columnifera, and another name in use is upright prairie coneflower. It has a deep central taproot, making it very drought tolerant, offering an opportunity to save time and money and to conserve precious water resources. And that specific epithet, columnifera, it actually means in the shape of a column, and that describes its most distinguishing feature, which is that tall central cone. And the yellow petals that are hanging downward from the cone, those are actually sterile flowers. It's the hundreds of disc florets on the cone that will be visited by the pollinators and eventually develop into seeds. And this plant does self-seed very well. It averages about 2 to 3 feet in height, but it is susceptible to deer browse. So Phyllis actually grows several different types of goldenrods in her garden. Pictured here is showy goldenrod, Solidago speciosa, and that tends to bloom a little bit later than most goldenrods. She also has stiff goldenrod and seaside goldenrod growing in her garden. Goldenrod flowers generally attract honeybees, bumblebees, ants, beetles, moths, and butterflies who are primarily seeking out nectar. And the caterpillars of many moths feed on various parts of different goldenrod species. Deer and rabbit also do occasionally eat the vegetative parts of the plant, but many goldenrods do contain mildly poisonous chemicals that do deter some herbivores. And the seeds are eaten by birds. Pictured here is a ruby-crowned kinglet perched on seaside goldenrod. And this is a pine siskin gorging on seaside goldenrod seeds this past fall, along with several dozen members of its flock. So as we continue our tour, Phyllis is pointing out some ground covers she has planted to create what's called a green mulch. In a natural ecosystem, bare soil is typically covered with organic matter, such as fallen leaves and twigs, or it's quickly colonized by plants. And mulch in the form of wood chips is often used by gardeners, but in my opinion, it gives a little bit of an unnatural and very human-made look to the garden. And a green mulch is a way to mimic nature with an intent to cover bare soil with living plants that creates a nice green substrate beneath your taller and more colorful and showy flowers. It's akin to selective weed gardening. Instead of weeds growing in the bare soil between your flowers, though, you intentionally plant fast growing and low growing plants that will spread out but not take over. And this one, she has some sedum mixed in with some partridge pea. And I also want to point out the use of a relatively large tree branch, now a log, that Phyllis is using as a garden border. And she's very clever. She finds very clever ways of saving money and using resources that nature provides. So partridge pea has very delicate feathered leaves that somewhat resemble ferns. It gets clusters of bright yellow flowers. They usually bloom between June and September continuously, and they're visited by butterflies and wasps and native bees. And it's also a host plant for various species of sulfur butterfly caterpillars. Fertilized flowers produce flattened seed pods containing 2 to 4 seeds. You can see in the right, and those seeds pods will dry up and turn brown. Partridge pea is highly adaptable to various soil conditions, dry sand, clay, and loam. And it's a prolific self-seeder, and it's also an annual. So it will continue to germinate each season in growing numbers if you allow it to. It's also a member of the legume family, so its roots form those really important relationships with fungi in the soil and help fix nitrogen, reducing the need for chemical fertilizers in the garden. And then the seeds are also food for birds and other wildlife. This is a plant called St. Andrew's Cross. It's another ground cover or subshrub, and it tolerates dry soil and full to part sun. Its small 4-petaled cross-shaped flowers bloom in July through September. Another one of my favorites called Pussy Toes makes a great ground cover. It has woolly, mat-forming leaves. The closed flower buds you can see are woolly somewhat. They resemble a cat's paw, especially when they're just forming. And the whitish pink flowers bloom in the spring on female plants. So Phyllis actually created garden beds that circle all the way around to the side of her house, adjacent to a stream bed there. So you can kind of recall this used to be lawn. So this is July of 2019. And a year later, she has started filling it in with lots of native plants. She has shrubby St. John's wort here and 9-bark. And the intention is to cover every inch of the mulch with living plants. This is one of my new favorite plants, shrubby St. John's wort. It's small, rounded. It's actually a multi-branched shrub, a small shrub. It has these clusters of really, really bright yellow flowers. They're just amazing. They bloom June through August. The flowers actually don't produce nectar. So they're visited by pollen-seeking bumblebees, halictid bees, and syrphid flies. And a blue-green, very fine textured foliage contains toxins, and that deters deer browse. But the chemical is also tolerated by caterpillars of gray hairstreak butterflies and a variety of moths that use the plant as a host. The fruit is a dry capsule. It persists until the following spring. The foliage turns a really pretty yellow-green in the fall. And as the shrub matures, the older woody stems turn a very attractive kind of reddish brownish color, and they begin to exfoliate. So they offer some interest in the winter time. And this plant thrives in both full sun or part shade. I grew some in my own yard from seed, amazingly, and they are just stunning. Low maintenance. This one is called Nine Bark, and it's a wildlife friendly kind of spreading deciduous shrub. It also has some really pretty exfoliating or peeling bark, which reveal nice layers of that reddish brown inner bark, which also offers winter interest. And it tolerates very poor soil conditions, no need to apply copious amounts of chemical fertilizers. These really pretty clusters of pinkish white flowers, they bloom May through June, and the flowers provide an excellent nectar source for native bees. And then it gets these drooping clusters of red fruit that offer food for birds in the summer. And native plants that produce fruit provide a really important food source for many backyard birds. I'm a birder, so I always try to plant plants that feed birds. This species is called a cedar waxwing, and it's named for those really interesting waxy red secretions that are forming little droplets on their wingtips. And they have a beautiful yellow edging on their tail. And contrary to most songbird babies who are raised on a diet of insect protein, which you may have learned if you are a Doug Tallamy fan like I am, waxwings actually provision their young with mostly fruit, amazingly. So that fruit is the predominant food of the adults as well. So if you want to attract cedar waxwings to your yard, plant native berry-producing trees, shrubs, and vines. Some include eastern red cedar, serviceberry, mulberry, dogwood, red and black chokeberry. I'm pretty sure this is a red chokeberry, winterberry, strawberry, raspberry. And trees and shrubs are a low maintenance plant, great choice for backyard gardeners who want to attract wildlife but might not have the time to tend to a flower garden. So we're rounding the corner of Phyllis's garden here. We see taller plants on the left and shorter plants to the right. The right-hand side is the stream bed below. She has common milkweed. As we know, that's a nice low maintenance, wildlife friendly perennial with just pretty thick green leaves with red veins. And it gets those really pretty rounded clusters of fragrant pinkish purple flowers similar to the swamp milkweed. Lots of bees visiting this one. And here's a well-known visitor. The monarch butterfly caterpillar is using it as a host plant. And Phyllis has some great blue lobelia, Christmas ferns, hay-scented ferns, sensitive fern, and ostrich fern planted here. And ferns are a really lovely low maintenance plant, and they are deer tolerant. So here's the great blue lobelia with its beautiful kind of purplish blue tubular flowers. They bloom July through September, visited by bees and hummingbirds. They do prefer part shade, but they'll tolerate full sun, especially if you can plant them in a sunny area that gets sun during the cooler part of the day, such as morning sun. Its native habitat usually includes a more wet area like swamps or lower areas, but it does tolerate some drought. So this tree that borders Phyllis's stream, this is called sour gum, also called black gum. It's a medium-sized, flowering deciduous tree, has lots of benefits for wildlife. Flowers from May to June, but very inconspicuous flowers. Its really shining feature are its berries that are food for birds. It's tolerant to wind, so it's wind resistant, flood resistant. It tolerates salty conditions. So it's a very valuable Jersey friendly tree for a backyard. And trees are a really important component, I think, of many landscapes, especially low maintenance landscapes. They offer shade, they reduce electric bills in the summer, and then they offer protection from winds in the winter, which can further reduce your heating costs. So here's Phyllis tending to a polyphemus moth caterpillar that she's protected inside a mist net around the branch of a red maple tree. And that's the host plant for these caterpillars. And there's that beautiful moth, that picture, bottom right-hand side. So red maple is a really stunning tree. It's one of the first to bloom in the spring. As the red flowers emerge in March and April, it's very easy to identify. New growth on red maple, including the fruit and the twigs and the leaf stalks, they're all red, so it's appropriately named. And these are the bright red fruit called samaras. And after they've matured and they fall off the tree, they kind of twirl to the ground like little helicopters. And spring migrants, such as this golden crowned kinglet, forage on red maple. It's looking for caterpillars and other insects that overwintered on this tree. So one of Phyllis's trees is receiving a nice hug from a vine. Native vines can be surprisingly low maintenance. Unlike invasive vines, native vines, such as this Virginia creeper, do not mature into a thick woody stem that strangles the tree. It is a vigorous tendril climber, but it's not parasitic and it will not feed on the tree and nor smother its host. On the contrary, actually, it can be relatively easy to pull down from a tree that it has climbed, and it's easy to cut with garden clippers at the end of the growing season if you choose. It's one of my favorite plants. Has small kind of greenish white flowers that bloom May through August. Kind of inconspicuous, but they do lead to one of the most attractive fruiting patterns, in my opinion. These clusters of berries, they turn from a pinkish to a blue to a dark purple, and they're showcased by these contrasting red stems. They're just gorgeous. And the berries are valued as food by birds and wildlife. And those nice star-shaped leaves turn a very deep red crimson in the fall. Very pretty. And Virginia creeper is an important host plant for moth larvae, including many species of sphinx moths. And Phyllis took this wonderful picture of a Virginia creeper sphinx moth that benefited from her vine. So along the bank of Phyllis's stream is an American beautyberry. So beautyberry is a very interesting and I think little known shrub, or I think it's becoming more popular. It's deciduous. It has really graceful arching branches and spectacular fruits. Tiny light lavender to pink flowers bloom like June through August, and they're followed by really bright purple berry-like fruits, which kind of encircle the stems. And those fruits actually remain until early winter, and then they're, of course, a source of food for many species of birds. So beautyberry is a great shrub to plant under trees to create a shady backyard understory. Another favorite shrub is buttonbush. It is many times found in nature growing at the water's edge. It does prefer more moist to wet conditions, so it's perfect for Phyllis's stream bed. However, I do have one growing in my own yard, and my yard is very dry and sandy. So this plant does have some tolerance for imperfect growing conditions. It has fragrant white spherical shaped flowers that resemble a pincushion. The flowers bloom around June, early summer-ish, and provide nectar for lots of native bees and butterflies, including this really lovely black swallowtail. It's also a host plant for several species of butterfly and moth caterpillar. So Phyllis's Jersey-friendly yard attracts and supports all kinds of wildlife. This hollowed out tree is where a chickadee raised a family last year. Chickadees are one of numerous species that rely on tree cavities for nesting. If you have a dead tree in your yard that is not a danger to your home or family, consider foregoing the time, effort, and cost of cutting it down. It might make a great home to a family of chickadees or titmouse or downy woodpecker, white-breasted nuthatch, eastern bluebird, house wren. There are so many species who are all competing for this prime real estate. On the other side of Phyllis's yard is her monarch way station, where she grows more milkweed and a plant called boneset. Common boneset. It's a clumping perennial. Its green leaves are really pretty. They fuse right around the stem. Very unique vegetative feature. And then shown here, you can see really tightly closed flower buds, and those are going to unfurl into clusters of small white flowers in the summertime. And butterflies such as this common buckeye value the nectar as a food source, and it's also a host plant for numerous butterfly and moth caterpillars. Boneset will readily self-seed and spread, offering you an instant meadow, really, in a few short seasons. And it does mix really well with goldenrod and ironweed and wingstem. And these are all weedy plants, but I consider these to be low maintenance plants because once established, they do not need any watering or fertilizers or any care. You should be looking though for or accepting of a wild meadow appearance to your backyard if you plant these species. So anyone can grow a Jersey-friendly yard, whether your yard is small or big. Please visit the Jersey-Friendly Yards website to learn more about how to create your own Jersey-friendly yard. So thank you so much for joining me this evening, and I'm happy to stick around and answer any questions.